Life in the wild for those creatures called wildlife is a constant drama. It is the story of creatures in search of food and of their prey. This story is sometimes called predation, and man is one of the leading characters. Primitive man depended almost entirely on wildlife for his food. With primitive weapons, food getting was a full-time job, and failure was common and often serious. There are no villains in this story. Each actor simply portrays its own way of life. Wild creatures were still the chief source of food for pioneer man, who constantly developed more efficient means of securing his prey. In doing this, man was a predator, supporting himself by predation. When man must hunt wildlife for food, hunting is not a sport, but a necessity. In contrast, modern man raises his own prey in the form of domestic animals. Thus, he has a supply of high-quality food readily at hand. Getting together the ingredients for a chicken dinner is not often thought of as predation, but it actually is predation brought to high efficiency. After man had learned to domesticate his food animals, he hunted wild creatures for sport. By medieval times, hunting with trained hawks and falcons was a popular sport of the upper classes. Falconry was a refinement of an art developed by primitive man to get food. Modern man has his leisure time too, and increasingly uses it in a manner we might call sport predation. The attraction of hunting is actually the contest between man's skill and the wariness of a wild creature whose whole life is a struggle for survival. In the outdoors, man is one again with the creatures that hunt, and he brings to his sport a great variety of equipment to help outwit his prey. Good equipment and knowing how to use it are both important. But sometimes even an experienced hunter is taken by surprise. The wild creatures we call game are the most difficult to outguess. They are hunted by many predators, including man. Whereas man, the chief predator, is mostly safe from predation, for wild creatures, life is still a matter of eat and be eaten. All wild animals are either predators or prey or both. The true prey species survive by their great productivity and constant vigilance. The predators survive by being expert at locating and killing their prey. This efficient predator is a weasel. In nearly every way, it is a highly developed hunter. It cannot see very well, but its acute sense of hearing and keen nose tell it there's a mouse nearby. Its long, rounded body is like a powerful coiled spring, and it can pass through holes as small as 1.5 inches in diameter in pursuit of a mouse. It is absolutely fearless and can move like lightning. The weasel sniffs the air trying to pinpoint its prey. The mouse knows the weasel is near, but it can only hide or get into a place too small for the weasel to enter. But its fear betrays it. and the weasel makes the kill. The box turtle is a predator too. Unlike the weasel, it is clumsy and slow and cannot catch alert, fast prey. But not all prey is fast and alert. The earthworm is slower than the turtle, which makes the worm suitable prey for this walking tank. Each prey species is matched in speed or alertness by some kind of predator, and each predator has qualities which enable it to catch some kind of prey. Man tends to resent the more efficient predators, but some species that he values highly are predators too. For example, songbirds that feed on worms or insects are predators, like turtles and weasels. Although robins also eat vegetable matter, they seem especially fond of earthworms. A robin struggling to subdue a reluctant worm may seem funny, but it is a serious business of survival for both the bird and the worm. For the robin, it is a way of getting food for herself and for her hungry young. It takes a lot of worms to keep the fast-growing youngsters happy. And with a nest of young to feed, this robin really has her bill full. Predation is a complex system in which many kinds of creatures depend on each other for food. Grasshoppers are plant eaters and are eaten by many predators. A grasshopper which jumps the wrong way becomes prey for fish. Alert fishermen often use this fact to advantage. This fisherman is using an artificial lure that creates a disturbance on the water like that of a struggling insect. The imitation may not be as effective as the real thing unless the fisherman knows just how to use it. This bass is interested, and the lure does look like something to eat. He starts for his intended meal. In striking it, the bass itself becomes prey for another predator more highly skilled in predation than himself. Sport fishing is really predation modified to produce sport and recreation. Although the prey is eaten, sport fishing is not necessary for survival. The catch rates mainly as a trophy. There are some creatures, like quail, that we value highly, and others, like skunks, that we value less. The quail doesn't value the skunk either. She leaves her nest both to escape and to decoy the skunk away. Predators like this skunk sometimes find quail nests and eat the eggs. While this delays production, it is not completely destructive and has its beneficial aspects. For most game birds, production of young begins in the spring. And the birds of any one species start pairing and rearing their young almost simultaneously. If all the young hatched at the same time, a widespread disaster like a storm could wipe out a large part of the year's production. Hens that lose their young are not likely to re-nest. But when predators take eggs early in the season, the hens almost always lay again. Thus, nest predation can be a service. These later young, hatched when conditions are more favorable, have a much better chance to live. All animals must eat to live. Some eat only food supplied by plants, which get their food from the soil. These plant eaters, in turn, become food for meat eaters. Some of these, like red-winged blackbirds, are only part-time predators. From their nesting grounds in the marshes, they forage over nearby farmlands, catching crop-destroying insects. In feeding her young on insect pests, the female redwing is benefiting farmers, and so are the young. Over the many centuries, prey species have become well adapted to predation. A good prey species must be large enough for a fair meal. It must be abundant enough to be readily available and alert to ensure enough escapes for breeding stock. It must also produce enough young to keep up abundance. The rabbit qualifies on every count. Foxes, like other wild predators, need a good, dependable supply of prey on hand, just as man requires livestock to meet his daily needs. Most prey species are very prolific and produce far more young than are needed to maintain populations. Yet the land supplies only enough food for a certain number. This leaves a surplus, and that's where the predator comes in. Let's watch this drama in action. Predation is one of nature's effective ways of keeping prey numbers within the limits the land can support. Water habitat, just like land habitat, is limited too. Prolific fish, like bluegills, soon become too abundant, particularly in ponds and lakes, unless there are enough predators like bass to keep their numbers in check. The same principles apply to all species. They apply equally to those we would like to see more abundant, like quail, and to those we think are already too plentiful. Some kinds, like mice, are destructive to man's interests. In control of pests, predation is a free service, which could be duplicated only at great expense. Mice, prey species which produce abundantly, are the main food supply of many predators like hawks. This silent sentinel of the skies looks over the countryside from his perch on a tall snag, from which he can see nearly anything that moves. Mice have to move around to feed and thus expose themselves to hawks. The hawk's keen vision, speed, and sharp talons and beak make him an efficient predator on mice. Indeed, hawks have been called man's aerial defense against field rodents. Why try to build a better mousetrap when nature has already provided the hawk? Not only the large animals are hunters. Predation exists even in the insect world. Here, one insect feeds on another. Were it not for such predation, the plant eaters, too small to be taken by large animals like hawks and foxes, would soon become overabundant and very destructive to man's crops. The entire countryside is a community with a great variety of life. It looks peaceful, but wildlife must be skillful and alert to survive here. Even while this quail is calling, he is on guard. The weasel is a hunter. He is mostly concerned with finding food. The rabbit's protection is its good vision, keen hearing, and fleetness. The pocket gopher finds his security underground. He is well equipped for digging, and his ability to dig himself quickly underground is his best protection against predation. It takes a fast-moving predator or one that can dig more quickly to catch him. Some creatures, like this killdeer, are camouflaged by their color pattern. Her fluffy chicks and the still unhatched egg also blend into the background, making them hard to see. The inquisitive blue jay acts like a burglar alarm. The wild creatures become excited and add their voices. They recognize the alarm call which he gives when a predator, like this Cooper's hawk, is lurking nearby. The alarm sounded, each animal reacts in its own fashion. With the predator located, the prey species seek shelter. The killdeer gets worried and leaves her nest in some way, warning her young to freeze. She tries to keep the hawk from spotting the nest with the motionless young. But one youngster gets restless. He was supposed to keep quiet. Now his movements attract the hawk's attention. The killdeer's mate flies in. The killdeer acts as if it had a broken wing, a trick used by many birds to divert attention from chicks or nests. But the chick doesn't heed the warning. The hawk chooses the prey most easily caught. The slow, stupid, or weak individuals are taken, and the more healthy and alert live to reproduce. These obedient youngsters survive, thus ensuring good stock to keep the race healthy and wild. Through centuries of experience, wild prey has learned to survive predation. But when man domesticated some species, they lost most of their wild attributes, including their ability to defend themselves against the wild predators, who still retain all the tricks of the wild. So unless man protects these tame creatures, who can no longer protect themselves, they are easy prey. Chickens in the open like this are easy victims for a night-hunting predator like the great horned owl. When a predator takes something man wants for himself, we call him a destructive varmint. This is the personal view of predation. It is the view we most often take when we think of predation or predator control. It is sometimes hard to remember that these predators are only part-time varmints. Most of the time, they prey on creatures that would otherwise cause even greater economic loss. For example, they eat rodents that destroy more of what man wants than do all the owls and hawks and foxes and coyotes put together. In fact, predators like owls are the best natural defense against these destroyers of man's food. Thus, while predators take some of the creatures man wants, they feed mostly on the animals destructive to man. There is another aspect of predation that is often overlooked and which is especially important to sportsmen. Predators are chiefly responsible for the quality and game we admire above all others, wildness. Wildness is a combination of speed, wariness, and deception. These qualities, the result of predation, are passed on to the offspring. Most of the sport in hunting is in outsmarting a wild, wary creature. This gives us a feeling of pride we do not have in killing a chicken or a cow. This coyote is hunting rabbits, and this rabbit is thinking about hunting cover. The coyote has picked up a promising scent and starts out to run it down. The rabbit's ability to hide and freeze makes him hard to see. But if the coyote has already spotted him, hiding won't help. Then he has to depend on his strong legs, highly developed for running, to escape. But the coyote can run fast too, and the outcome is always in doubt. The rabbit can't keep up his speed long. He has to find shelter. Since speed isn't enough, the rabbit tries another escape method, dodging. This is where all of the tricks of escape learned through the centuries must be used. And of course, if the rabbit is too old or sick or weak to exercise these tricks effectively, they won't help him. He has to be able to outsmart a predator that's pretty smart himself. If he doesn't, he'll lose out, and the coyote will have his dinner. Because of a combination of alertness, speed, and dodging which are learned by living in the wild, and the fortunate presence of a brush pile, the rabbit wins this time. But someday, when the rabbit is not so alert or strong, it will be the coyote's turn. The story of predation is the real story of life in the wild. This story repeats itself around the clock and through the year with all sorts of wildlife. The things we admire about the quail are the things that enable it to survive in the wild. The better a game species is able to resist predation, the greater appeal it seems to have for us as game. Our admiration often takes the form of a superpredation, hunting, and we take pride in succeeding where all other predators fail. But sometimes we enlist the aid of our own trained predators in locating our favorite game. But though we train dogs to find and hold our game, we reserve the right to kill for ourselves. With his efficient equipment and trained helpers, man is the greatest predator of all. He also has an ability the other predators don't have. He can change the environment at will to influence greatly all the wildlife in the community. He can provide more of his favorite prey or less by the way he uses land. He does this every day, but too often his use destroys habitat and desirable wildlife more than it improves and increases it. Actually, the wild predator does more for wildlife by pruning out the unfit than man does, though man also preys on wildlife. The wild predator does more to benefit man by keeping destructive creatures in check than he does to harm man's interests. The qualities in wildlife that we admire are often the qualities we admire in ourselves. Strength, grace, beauty, alertness. Wildlife that we call game typifies them all. And whether it wears furs, fins, or feathers, wildlife has these qualities largely because of predation. The predator himself is often graceful and beautiful. His role in the wild community is important to the community and to man. So rather than condemning the predator, we should control him when necessary, but respect him for what he really is, an essential instrument in a way of life.